bread shop, and buy me coffee about 6 on my channel. So I'm reading for Star, Evil Star by Anthony or Hobbit. Good luck, Senior Cole look after Pedro and Matto. They have needed for you. Richard turned and walked out of the throne room. The Prince of the Incas and his amateur watched him until he had gone. The helicopter took them into Cusco, where a 5-seater Cinsa plane was waiting to carry them on the longer leg of the journey to Nazca. Matt was amazed how smoothly everything had gone. There were no passports. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. No passports needed. No travel documents. They simply landed at Cusco Airport, walked across the tarmac and took off again. Not one official so much as glanced in their direction. It seemed that the Incas still had plenty of influence in Peru. A book in Peru, and while Matt was with them, he would be safe. The flight took 3 hours. Pedro seemed more comfortable in the plane than he had been in the helicopter. He had barely spoken since the golden disc had been shown to him in Cabamba, and Matt wondered what was going on in his head. In the seat next to him, Richard was also unusually quiet. He hadn't told Matt what the Inca prince had said to him, and Matt had decided not to ask, but obviously it hadn't been good news. Atok had flown the helicopter, but on the plane he was just a passenger sitting on his own at the back, deep in thought. The pilot of the Cinsa was behind the controls, almost completely invisible in a leather jacket, flying helmet and goggles. He had said nothing as they come on board and nothing during the flight. But suddenly he called out, out shooting make himself heard above the noise of the engine. I took leant across the aisle. Look out of the window, he said. We pass over Naka lines. The plane dipped, dropping ever lower, as if about to land. Matt felt his stomach lunge. They were well below the level of the clouds, flying over a flat, empty desert. The desert is empty, so they flied over, and he wondered what it was meant to see. The naked lines, they didn't seem to be anything here, so it was blank. And when he caught his breath, there was a line drawn in the ground, running dead straight for as far as his eye could see. It must have been carved in the earth, and it couldn't have been done by chance. It was so precious. Next to it he saw a shape, a huge rectangle, narrow at one end, then the other at least a mile long. A runaway? No, like the line. It had simply been drawn in the ground. Over there, Richard said, leaning across him, there was more lines running in every direction, crossing over one another, all as straight as arrows. Matt had never seen anything like it. The old desert was nothing less than a fantastic doodling pad on a galactic scale. He couldn't imagine how it had been done, or what, or done, or when not did or not understand how the lines had survived, when surely the wind should have blown them away. The pilot called out to them again, the plane titled and banked. Now Matt saw pictures even more incredible than the lines. They first showed a hummingbird. It was drawn naturalistically, but even so it was unmistakable, with a long pointed beak, wings and a tail. Matt tried to work out its size. It was hard to say, but 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 if he could see it so clearly, this high up, it must be at least 100 meters long. One by one, fantastic margin of creatures appeared on the surface of the desert. As the plane passed directly overhead, there was a monkey with a sparring tail, a whale, a condor, and a huge spider with a bolted body and 8 legs reaching out. Matt recognized the spider. It was identical to the one he had seen on the page of Salamander and photocopied from the monk's diary. The drawings are simple, almost childlike, but no child could possibly have pronounced them on this scale. Each creature must surely have been the work of a dozen of men, and 3 was something very precious about the way each one had been exhausted. The legs of the spider, for example, were mirror image of each other, as were the wings of the bird. Every line was straight, every circle was perfectly formed. It was obviously, even at first glance, that the entire tapestry the entire tapestry had been pronounced with mythical presence. A single road ran through the centre of the desert, actually distracting some of the line. Some of the lines, the Pan American Highway, was completely straight too, but next to the drawings it was cold and lifeless, a, a, piece of modern vandalism. Cutting, cutting. Through a work of ancient art, the pilot turned in his seat, pulling off his helmet and goggles, and that was when Matt saw that it wasn't a man, but a woman, about 50 years old, with a square, rather plain face and long, almost colourless hair. She wore no makeup, and it would have done little good if she had long exposure to the sun and desert winds had wrinkled her skin behind oak, but she had likely brightened blue eyes. She was smiling. "So what do you think?" she called out. Nobody spoke. They were all of them too surprised. "And I'm Joanna Chambers," the woman said. "I heard you wanted to see me, so I thought I'd come and collect you myself." The plain-blooded caught in an air pocket, and briefly she returned to the controls. Then she turned around again. "They told me you've come to Peru looking for a gate," she went on. "Well, if there really is such a thing, if the gate exists, and if it's about to be opened, you'd better take a good look. Here, 500 square kilometers of some of the emptiest, dreadest desert in the world, and that's where your gate is to be found." Professor Jonah Chambers lived about a mile from the small, pretty airport that merely survived tourists waiting to visit the Nazca Line. She had one of the most beautiful houses Matt had ever seen, a low white building with a green tiled roof and a broad veranda led by a colonnade. It had been built in a garden the size of a park where llamas wandered freely. Across the lawn, and dozens of birds fly the air with colour and song, and a low white wall surrounded it. But there was no gate, no guards. Everything about the place stressed that visitors were always welcome. Richard, Matt, and Pedro, with Atomic beside him, were sitting in the dining room eating a late lunch of cold meat and fried yuca chips, which were like potato, only sweeter. The room had a barely tiled floor and a fan, and led directly onto the vendor. The professor was at the head of the table now that Matt could examine her more closely. He saw she was a large, rather masculine woman, through not as attractive as he had first thought. She looked like the sort of woman who should have been teaching gym at an expensive girls' school. She had changed into white trousers and a baggy white shirt tucked in at the waist. She had a bottle of iced beer in one hand and a thin cigar in the other. The smell of its smoke hung around them. "I'm very pleased to meet you," Professor Chambers said. "You're welcome to my house. Nice plane. Nice place, Richard muttered. I was fortunate to be able to buy it. I made a certain amount of money. So they made some money, gives, they made a lot of money of writing books, particularly the natural lines. What are the natural lines, Matt asked. Chambers puffed on the cigar, and the tip glowed an angry red. I find it astonishing that you have that you haven't heard of them, she remarked. They just happen to be one of the great wonders of the ancient world. I'm afraid it's all part of its domain. Down English children's school they didn't seem to teach anything those days. I have heard of them. Eva Richard said bizarre the professor swallowed smoke the wrong way and burst into a fit of coughing. She took another swag of beer and sat back in her chair. Well, I'm not going to give you a history lesson, not yet. Anyway, first I want to know about you. I got a telephone call from a very special friend. Recently, you've been to Valley Bamba. Nobody said anything. They didn't know how much she knew. I'm green with every Professor Chambers examined. I know that the Incas survived her. They consider me their friend, and I've spoken with them frequently, but I've never been to their lost city. As far as I knew, nobody else, unless they have pure Inca blood, apart from you three. Then she nodded at Matt and Pedro. They must think very highly of you. I can assure you it's a great honor. There are gatekeepers at Talk muttered. He seemed offended by the way Professor Chambers had spoken. Gatekeepers, yes, of course, two of the five old ones. You know about that too, Richard asked. I knew a great deal about a great many things, Mr. Colt. She reached forward and took a grape from a bowl, then flicked it out of the window. A large tropical bird swooped down and caught it, and yes, I had heard stories about the Mad Monk, Mad Monk of Condor, and his attractive history of his. I was never sure whether to believe it or not, but then that those children have turned up, I suppose I better add. Know what about this page of yours? The one from the diary. Matt had it in his pocket. He took it out and gave it to her. She read it briefly once, then again. Well, some of it's fairly straightforward, said. She said the place of Huaquala in Rami. That's only 2 days from now. Doesn't leave us a lot of time. I'm not sure about this white bird through. It could have been a condor, I suppose. What about a swan? Matt, Matt said. A swan, what makes you think of that? I had Salamander talking about a swan. He exposed he could have mentioned his dream, but decided not to. He said it's to be in position at midnight. Are you sure? Yes, Professor Chambers had irritated. Matt and she saw it. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's just that it seemed so unlike. There's a condor and a hummingbird in the Nazca Desert. You saw them this morning, but there's no swan. As far as I know, there are no swans in Peru." I thought there were swans, but none. "What about the rest of the poem?" Richard asked. "Well, the old page refers to the Naka line. There's no doubt about that. The place of Qualada, for example." She stopped herself. "There's no point talking about the Nazca lines until you know what they are, so I'm going to give you a history lesson. After all, it would take me a whole week to describe them to you, and even then I would only scratch the surface. But we don't have a week, and anything young people those days have no conscience, so let me try and put it as simple as I can." Professor Chambers got up and helped herself to another beer, flicking the cap off with a penknife. Matt was almost surprised that she didn't use her teeth. "There are many mysteries in the world," she began, even now in the 21st century. "Stonehenge, the pyramids, Uluru in Australia. There are all sorts of places and things, some of them man-made, some of them natural, that science can't explain. But if you ask me, the Nazca lines are the biggest mystery of a lot. Let's start with the Nazca Desert. It's huge, it's hot, and it's empty. About 2,000 years ago, the ancient Indians of Nazca decided to trudge out here and draw a series of extraordinary pictures in the ground. They did this by removing the darker stone from the surface of the desert and exposing the lighter soil underneath. There's almost no rain in Nazca and a very little wind. That's how the lines have survived. Are you with me so far?" She glanced at Atok, who was translating rapidly for Pedro. He nodded. "Good. Well, some of those pictures are very beautiful. You saw them from the plane. There are animals, a whale, a condor, a monkey, a hummingbird, and a huge spider, and there are triangles, spirals, and a star-shaped as well as hundreds of perfectly straight lines, some of them stretching for up to 25 miles." She took a quick swag of beer. Now that is where the mystery begins. The Nazca lines can only be seen from the air. In fact, they were only discovered in 1927 when one of the first aeroplanes in Peru flew over them. I wish I'd been on board. That's all I can say anyway. Obviously, the Nazcan people didn't have planes, so the question is, why go to all the trouble of making the lines on the pictures if they'd never be able to see them? There have been all sorts of theories," Professor Chambers went on. One writer believed that the line was some sort of airport for space trips from another planet. It's true that one of the pictures does show a man with a round head, and some people believe it to be an astronaut. A lot of people think they were drawn for the benefits of the ancient gods, they would be up in the sky, so they be able to see them. My own feeling has always been that they are in some way connected to the stars. Perhaps they were used to forecast stars, or perhaps she paused. I've often wondered if they would want to put there to warn us about something. A cigar glowed, red smoke crept up the side of her face. She seemed to be deep in thought, but when abruptly she sat down again. Many pharaohs, but the point is nobody knows for sure is the place of Qualoqa in the desert, Matt said. Next, I'll just I'll get up to there, then I'll finish. Yes, it's Professor Chambers nodded. Once again, you should have seen it from the plane. God is a world in quite Quatsinda that Adrian lads. Are you okay? Irene D. A rectangle flew over this morning. Before the place of Quolaca, Matt read out the second line of the poem. That means the gate must be in front of the rectangle. It may not mean anything of the sort. The professor snapped. There is no gate in the desert. That is to say there are no standing stones. On no markers, no building there, just the earth and the lines. But there's a platform. That returned to Salamander, said he had to find the platform. Well, good luck to him. I've been into the desert 1,000 times. And I've never seen a platform. Professor Chambers tapped as into a saucer on the table. Mind you, it could be burned. Mind you, it could be burned. So muttered, I suppose that's always a possibility. Are you sure there's no swan? Richard asked. The professor slammed down a cigar, exhausting it. Mr. Cole, she exclaimed, the day I began studying vernacular lines you were still in nappies. How dare you suggest Matt thought she was going to throw something at the journalist, but she forced herself to calm down. I'm sorry, she said, but you have to understand that Nazca lines are my life, which is to say I've devoted my whole life to them. I visited them for the first time when I was 23 years old, and since they've never let me go. Can you understand what there are so few things left in the world that we don't know? Science has explained everything away, and yet there we have one of the last great mysteries, a old desert filled with drawings that nobody understands. It's my sole ambition to solve the mystery before I die. And the fact that you should walk into my life right now, just 3 days before Inter-Raimi, you come with your extraordinary story, and maybe what you've told me will finally unlock everything. I've been waiting for this for more than 20 years, so I mustn't quarrel with you. You have to let me think about what you've had to say, interrupt me. Richard muttered. He was remembering what the Inca had said before the sun had risen and set 3 times. That's right, Mr. Cole. That's the one thing we do now. We we have less than 48 hours at midnight, 2 days from now. That's when the gate is going to open. I hope you enjoy my reading. Subscribe. Right. I hope alright, subscribe it for like, thank you. Click on my screen, my thumbnail, share, like. I hope I get to 4K subscribers. I hope I get to a lot of views on my videos. I want 30k likes, and I want to loads of comments. Thank you for watching. What's my video from start to finish? Watch my video from start to finish. Click on the bell for more uploads.